Welcome back to Unapologetically Visible, the podcast for high achieving Latina and women of color founders who are done being the best kept secret. I'm your host, Christina Olivarez, award winning visibility and leadership coach, TEDx speaker, and founder and CEO of the Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation about fibroids, fertility, and being a high achieving entrepreneur. This is a continuation of last week's episode, so I'm grateful that you are still here joining in. If you listen to part 1 of the conversation, which yes, in the show notes below, I will link. I am officially now 1 week post-op from my robotic myomectomy. So yay! Obviously, I'm recording this episode before my surgery, so I'm going to really give out that manifestation, that feeler out there that I am on the other side now and that I'm recovering and I have a smooth recovery. And in order to see if I made it to the other side, I am going to have some Instagram content available. But I'm telling future me right now that we are on the other side. And Christina, I'm so proud of you. So great job on your recovery. But today I wanted to bring you part 2, which is titled Preparation and Decisions, because it is really important to understand how to best prepare yourself and your business and your life around a medical diagnosis and advocating too on how to build systems and processes as you make a decision for surgery. So today I'm going to really focus on where I kind of led from in terms of making a decision to have surgery and how I prepared my business, my body, my life around this robotic myomectomy that happened so that I could really best prepare and get myself to a really comfortable place of making that decision. So I would say about 2 weeks before Hustle and Socialize 2025 conference, the fertility doctor, the fertility specialist that I was seeing already had my MRI results. So going into this process, even though I had ultrasounds that confirmed that my uterine fibroids were present, the doctors really needed to get a better look at the positions of the fibroids and also to know what the best next step of action that we needed to take. And so in April, the day after Easter, I had my very first MRI experience, which was wild. And I will say, if you know me, you know that I'm a huge Grey's Anatomy obsessed fan, but like only seasons 1 through 10, y'all. After McDreamy died, that's it. But what was so crazy is Grey's Anatomy has been a part of my life and also my marriage. Pete proposed to me with Pick Me, Choose Me, Love Me, that beautiful Meredith Grey monologue. And right after I got out of my MRI, chasing cars started to play like randomly. So I took it as a sign, a symbol, and a clue. But after we got my MRI results, that's when we knew that the best plan of action was to get a referral for a surgeon to talk surgery. And I do want to say, like, the decision was kind of already made because of the fact that there was no potential possibility of conception or even having a viable, healthy pregnancy because of the size of the fibroids. I mean, the size of the fibroids, they are, between 9 centimeters to 4 centimeters, and there's just no room for a baby to grow. So we sort of knew like, hey, this is going to happen no matter what, right? But it was really trying to figure out like who's the best surgeon, what referrals, and most importantly, health insurance. And I've had like the worst experience with health insurance as a self-employed. And I know right now, so many of us are advocating for the ACA and making sure that we, the people, have better healthcare options. Our system is so broken, but we deserve adequate medical care. It's my soapbox, but you know where I stand. But because of the conference and waiting on my insurance to see what surgeons would potentially be the surgeon, I had to wait again. And I just feel like, again, like I said in the first part, waiting was the standard. I just had to wait. I had to continue to endure more pain and more irregular bleeding. And mind you, like I've been very transparent about this whole year that my 10th year in business has taken a toll on me, especially the misalignment that I experienced with Hustle and Socialize this year in particular, I've been super transparent about how it just didn't go according to plan and how expansion really took a toll on me from all ends. I mean, I was super depleted. And so right around the time of Hustle and Socialize, I knew that I was going to go down the path of surgery. And it was just really difficult for me to process this. I think that I had been through the ringer mentally and emotionally and financially with Hustle and Socialize, which is like one arm of my company. And I was really in the thick of what I was experiencing. And I just felt so lost with Hustle and Socialize. And I felt depleted, and I just felt like I've given my all. I couldn't even think about a potential surgery or my health. Like, that's why things need to change, because when you put your business first and not even prioritize your own health, that's the toxicity, right? That's the toxic part of like hustle. But I'm so aware of that. So I knew that going in. But I felt like after the conference, that's when I made that decision to take a 1 month sabbatical. And even though the actual sabbatical was 2 weeks, this is where I finally just had that moment of clarity for myself. And I knew during that time frame, I knew that something fundamentally had to shift with my life and my business. I knew if I really wanted to live out my purpose and to do things that fill me up with joy and that really are in alignment with my human design, because at that point I was really leaning into my human design, I knew that I needed to make some changes. And these were difficult changes. These were hard changes. These were changes that honestly, just like these fibroids, were 25 months in the making. And I just feel like that time off gave me that clarity that I needed to do. So in that time off, that's when I really started preparing mentally, not just for surgery, but like really thinking about how I want to reimagine Social Butterfly Gal and Hustle and Socialize. Like, this is such a beautiful gift. I keep saying that all the time because I'm really in gratitude, but I do really feel like when I hit the 10 years in business, it kind of was like a reset button. And it made me think about all of the things that I get to do differently, because I have all this wisdom and knowledge already of being in 1 decade in business. So I get to like actually think about everything that I've done and build differently. And again, I knew I had to mentally prepare for this surgery and also think about kind of like working backwards. So when I hit 20 years in business, which is my next decade, God willing, and hopefully, right, we really hope that around that time I could have like a kid that's not like a baby. Like, this kid is probably going to be somewhere like 7, 8 years old, right? So like just really fully kind of thinking about like, what do I really want to be doing at year 20 of my business and my life? When I think about like that stage of motherhood, when I think about that stage in my business, when I think about actually thinking about having children at that age that's not baby, like how would I want to work backwards? And I think like being in my late 30s and early 40s, this next decade, right? I'm going to be 44 by the time I hit 20 years in business, which is wild. But when I was 24, when I first started, I never thought about motherhood. I never thought about all these things, or even my health, and even potential fertility, infertility struggles. I never thought of that at 24. It was always like, let's get straight to work. We're going to hustle. We're going to grind. We're going to get the money because we need to live and we need to make sure that like we have food on the table. But it never was this different way of thinking about how I'm going to plan for my business. And so, like I've said before, the insurance stuff is a pain in the ass. Our system is super broken. And around this time frame, I was what I like to call interviewing surgeons, because on one hand, I was struggling with insurance coverage and making sure that the insurance was able to cover these surgeons. And even if they were out of the network or in the network, I mean, just all dealing with that. I mean, I had to jump through hoops to fight, to get seen, to do all the things with insurance. And I will say that originally the surgeon that I wanted, something was going on with our insurance and I couldn't even get seen. And so I saw a different surgeon. And that first surgeon that I saw, which was the second surgeon, And it's important to remember that when you don't have a gut reaction, when you feel like you're being dismissed or not heard, or if you know in your heart that this is not a good fit, if you don't feel like, yeah, they got me, it is really important to get that second or third opinion. It's important to do your research to make sure that you are feeling heard, seen, all the things. And I knew for me in particular, this just wasn't about my fertility. Obviously, we want to preserve my fertility, but this was also about preserving my autonomy, my power, my choice, my right to decide what happens with my body, and knowing that I have the best medical team possible for a positive outcome. That's what it was all about. And so after that appointment, I cried and I didn't rush. I really continued to ask questions, continued to look for the data, and thankfully, I was able to get an appointment with the original surgeon that I wanted. So one thing for sure is when it came to that preparation time to to interview a surgeon and to see if this was, the best fit, it really took time. And again, we don't have a lot of time, but with this, you do have to take time. And as high achieving women, like we're taught that we have to decide super fast, we have to act fast, we have to move fast. But when it comes to your body, especially a woman's body, you have to slow down to really hear what it's truly asking you for. And so that was my first real lesson in trusting my gut, which is in alignment with my human design. And I think when I was in the first surgeon era, when I was interviewing that first surgeon, I really leaned in with my human design. So I do feel like this is a beautiful gift of looking on the bright side of things, because one thing I know is that I'm a systems and process kind of gal. And one of the things that I think I was struggling with the fear of like taking the next step in motherhood was like, what's going to happen to my business? Like, what's going to happen to all these things? And as self-employed, we don't have paid maternity leave. Certain laws in Texas in particular don't even have that, even if you are taxed as an S Corp. Our maternity leave is created by how much we're able to save, how much time we want to take off, how we maneuver, and if we are financially resourced, not just from ourselves, but with our partner as well. So I fully believe that it's important to actually talk about what being resourced truly means, not only as an entrepreneur, but as somebody who is building revenue and understanding what offers are going to lead you to the best possible outcome for you if you need to unfortunately step away, whether that's for medical leave, for maternity leave, for taking care of aging parents, for taking care of any siblings. Like, as an entrepreneur, one of the things and the lessons that I've learned, especially through this experience, is that we do have to unfortunately plan for like worst case scenario. We have to save. We have to understand like what would happen today if the rule pulled out from under us. And I think like experiencing my husband's layoff and having my business really provide for us for a really good full year was that first light bulb moment for me to realize like, fuck, I really need to have my shit together. And so it's always really great to understand these things, but also to talk about what it means to be properly resourced with your partner. What does it look like for your partner to have the time off? Are they able to also negotiate and advocate? When you think about building a village, who is in your immediate circle? And not only to like ask for help, but to be comfortable with receiving help. So many of us struggle on either both ends or even just the mere thought of asking. Some of us don't like to ask for help. We think we got it. And then even on the receiving, like I never want to feel like I'm a burden to other people. And so receiving for me is like really, really difficult. But I think what was interesting enough for me in particular was when Pete got laid off, it really forced us to get super freaking clear on our priorities and just the cost of everything, not just like financially, but also like time and energy and all those things. And everything that happened up until this point, right? He was able to take that time off. He was able to go with me to doctor's appointments and being able to be with me every step of the way. And I think also about what it means to have that village. We talk so much about having the village, but also being a villager. And I believe that that's so true. And so one of the things that I've had to learn and to understand is really being in a position where I can fully receive. And that to understand, even potentially before having a baby, what it meant to prepare my business for time off, for recovery. And that's why I say this is such a beautiful gift, because even though in this circumstances, I am actually getting a front row seat into what it would look like for me to build out specific processes in my company to understand what offers are in alignment with the best possible outcome for taking time off. And especially like moving forward after the fibroid surgery, I am going to be having a C-section for future pregnancies. And so now I understand what toll that's going to take on my body, even though this is like a baby version of it, like how to best prepare and fuel my body and do everything that I need to do and understand like how to slow down. And that is one of the most beautiful gifts I feel like this is giving me, because it's that gift of preparation and that gift of like being able to understand what slowing down means, and also like really lowering my stress. So I've been planning, conferences for the last 7 years. And one of the things that I really had to come to terms with is that planning a huge 200 plus conference that takes over a year to 10 months to plan out and pour so much of my energy to is not in alignment right now with my current season of where I'm headed. And that has been something that I've had to surrender and accept and let go and be okay with. And it is freaking hard. And I think what is exciting me is the opportunity to reimagine what Hustle and Socialize becomes and how to build differently, and really doubling down on offers that are going to bring me the most fulfillment, joy, success, and money. And what it's going to lead to like the best possible outcome of not only just revenue growth, but also take home pay in my profit. And so this allows me to understand who I need to hire, what systems and softwares I need to put into place so that I could really build with intentionality for my next decade in business. It's moments like this that really cause me to just think differently in how I build my company. What was so beautiful was I found a surgeon who I really vibed well with. I felt safe and comfortable. And the moment that she walked into the room and she started to actually map out all the things that she was going to be doing in surgery and answer every single one of my questions, I knew I was in the best hands, or at least I felt very connected to her and felt like this was a decision that is an aligned decision with my human design. And also what was so beautiful was I got to choose when I wanted to have surgery. So I got to choose the date. They didn't choose it for me. They let me know when the surgeon is available, but I got to choose the date. And I knew that the best time frame for me was going to be in between that Thanksgiving break, like right in between, because I knew that I was able to take a good solid week off, but because of Thanksgiving, normally I would take that week off anyway. And so that allowed for me to fully take 2 weeks off of work and adjust when needed. And so I made that decision to have the surgery around that time, but also I felt really good about what it would look like if I were to come back that first week of December or even the second week of December. It allowed me to build out specific systems and processes and understand how many clients I actually needed to onboard in order to have specific monthly revenue to feel safe with the amount of money that I have saved up, the bills that needed to get paid, the medical expenses that needed to get paid, and to be able to have a recovery where I wasn't so dependent on hurrying up and trying to find clients. Although I will say you can pre-book for any December intensives or VIP days. I have very small window available on return for my recovery, but also I have a digital product page that I will put the links in the show notes below that you can also use to support my recovery. But this opportunity allowed for me to understand that I do have full autonomy over my company. and how I onboard, how I work with clients, when I could schedule their coaching sessions, how I can support them, what boundaries I actually need to put in so that I can make sure that I'm pouring into myself while also storing up energy so that I could be able to pour into them when I'm fully recovered. It also allowed for me to understand how to build those systems and processes for the long run when I think about what it looks like preparing for maternity leave in the future. And it gave me a different perspective of what is actually bringing me money in my companies. I'm able to track which offers and the percentages of those offers really do benefit me in the long run when I think about not just the fulfillment and the joy, but my time and my energy and the cost that it has if I'm not fully fulfilled, especially around coaching. It really put into perspective of where I was spending my energy and how I need to think differently when I think about all of the different enrollment pieces for my business. When I was focusing on building specific systems and preparing for my surgery, I knew I needed to understand how many clients I needed to bring on in order to have the best possible outcome for recovery. And I was leading with my human design because while I do love the intuition, the data also came into play. I love my numbers. I'm a strategist and I love data. So while I was preparing for the surgery, I was also deep in the analytics. I would look at the calendar and from time to time, I knew that, okay, I was going to have my surgery on this date. And when I worked backwards, it was a full 6 weeks of preparation time, which gave me roughly about 2 months to fulfill and onboard clients, to speak with them and to let them know of when their start date would be and how I would support them. If I did have like my private coaching clients, they're ongoing. And so there are specific timeframes where I would have to move around their sessions and make sure that I was deeply supporting them while also making sure like, hey, I'm putting everything into perspective for me. And I think that's the beauty of entrepreneurship is you can talk it out and you could work things out. It's not not like a big stress. I remember like I had onboarded a client and she was like so just wanting to know like how is this going to work and making sure that I was assuring her like, hey, nothing's going to change. I'm just going to not be available for specific time frames. I'll show up when I'm able to show up, but we're still going to have your sessions. We're still going to do the thing and you're still going to get your coaching in the way that is best for the coaching container that you're on. And so that allowed me to map out cash flow projections, how I could continue my sessions, consider what I needed to allocate in terms of bills, and just kind of have an idea of how to really stretch my business for this current season I'm at. After all those numbers were on the table, I made the gut decision of what really feels good within my body and where could I move in terms of the offers that I need to double down on, which was definitely private coaching. And it also allowed for me to understand how I could use the data to be able to know what my baseline was of the amount of revenue I needed to bring on a monthly basis in that 2 month. As we're getting closer to the end of the year, it allowed for me to get a baseline of all of the things that I needed to do. I looked at my Q4 projections and my goals for strategic sales and marketing. And then I also build specific systems and processes for my content and being able to look at what I'm going to be posting during my time off and what I needed to batch, especially around podcast episodes. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to fully show up in the way that I need to show up here at the podcast studio. And so I knew that if I was going to record any podcast episodes, I needed to go ahead and map out how many I would be batching and think about how can I create that visibility buffer that I always talk about. Especially with like talk to camera videos, and creating that library was super important for me. In those moments of my recovery where I don't feel mentally there, I can always go back to that library of content that I have and choose specific forms of content that I could easily crank out without showing up. But if I wanted to show up, I would also allow that flexibility and that fluidity to be able to do that as well. I doubled up on sessions for my current clients so that they feel supported throughout this recovery phase. I adjusted any type of sessions that needed to be adjusted, and I set clear WhatsApp boundaries so that I could give myself permission to not be productive during my recovery, but also when I feel like I can allow for a small window of support for my clients if they needed that support. I created a system that allows for my business to breathe when I step away, and that is powerful leadership. But when I think about preparation, also, not only am I thinking about how am I going to prepare for my business, but I also had to look at it as I'm preparing for a marathon. Which meant that on the personal side, I had to think about preparation in terms of my strength and what I was eating and what I was fueling my body so that I could have optimal recovery. So, one of the biggest decisions that I made in terms of my preparation was I doubled down on my Pilates and strength resisting workouts. Usually, I work out 3 times a week, do a Pilates and strength training routine on YouTube with Jessica Vallant. And I work out 3 times a week. But for the surgery, I decided to give myself a 21-day challenge of working out every single day to better prepare my core, my pelvic floor, my muscles, my strength, so that I could really prime my body for that best recovery. And also, when I look at my nutrition, I think one of the greatest things about going into surgery is you do blood work. And I always see like blood work as your data line. It allows for you to understand where you need to adjust in your diet, in your nutrition, what you need to be doing. And so prior to the surgery, I had pre-op blood work, and I was able to see where I was needing a little bit more protein or my potassium was low. So I added more foods that could support my recovery as well, which is what I love, that baseline. And when I also think about it, not only preparing my body with my wellness and my health and exercising, but I also knew that on the personal side, one of the things that I needed to do from a systems and processes perspective was outsource my organizing and cleaning stuff. I knew that I needed to hire other people that are way better at cleaning than I am. And so I worked with this incredible small business called All the Small Things. They are a small business home organizing company in Austin, Texas, that is actually branching into San Antonio. And so I had Christy and Stephanie come to organize my whole entire apartment to prepare for my mom's arrival, as she's going to help take care of me, but also just to make sure that everything was in order. And then I had a cleaning service called Made Pro Cleaning to come and do deep cleaning, because there's no way that I could really scrub deeply in that tub and just make sure that everything was ready. I knew that I had to have these systems and processes in place that would really help set me up to be properly resourced and to be ready, especially having a clean house and just knowing that I could really rely on all of these factors to set me up for the best possible optimal recovery. I feel super grateful to be able to work with incredible clients, to be able to outsource and invest in things like this. So I feel prepared and ready. And I know it's also because I've surrendered and leaned into my human design. This surgery, this preparation, this season is teaching me that being visible isn't just about showing up online. It's about showing up for yourself when no one is watching. So if you take anything from these 2 episodes, let it be these things. You are allowed to redesign your life before it breaks you. You are allowed to change your business model because your body deserves it. You are allowed to prioritize your healing and to advocate for yourself and your health, not to pause, but as preparation for your next era. So I don't know exactly how I'm going to feel after my surgery. I do not know how long the recovery is going to take, what my energy will look like from a day-to-day basis, or what are the next steps for motherhood and parenthood and all the things that come with building a company. But I do know this. I'm not afraid anymore because I've done the work to prepare, to trust, to release, to grieve, and to rebuild. And that's what being unapologetically visible is. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for walking this journey with me. I will see you next week. If you resonated with this episode, here's what I want you to do next. Subscribe and leave a review because that helps this podcast reach more women like us, women who were never meant to stay hidden, women who are meant to be highly visible leaders. Share this episode with someone you love who is maybe experiencing a slight pause in their business and they are looking to prepare and build out systems and processes. And DM me on Instagram at the Social Butterfly Gal. Tell me your biggest refrain, your biggest breakthrough from today's conversation, and what kind of support you need in this season. If you're feeling the call to go deeper, to recalibrate your personal brand, leadership, and your visibility, I would love to support you through one-on-one coaching. You can find the coaching information and offers in the links in the show notes below, or send me a DM with the word coaching, and I'll personally walk you through what offers are in alignment with your current season and what it looks like to step into this next era with clarity, confidence, and unapologetic authority. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and for all the shares and reviews. Remember this, you didn't come this far to play safe. You came here to be unapologetically visible. I'll see you next week.